Hello students. Today's English class we are going to be focusing on types of irony. Now as we've been studying short stories, we've learned there are different elements of literary excellence, different ways that writers use words in order to bring life into the writing. So today we're going to be talking about irony, and it's a word we don't think about very often, but it's part of our everyday lives and conversations. A lot of times we are sarcastic, which is a form of irony. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about some types of irony today. You can take out your notes and take notes as we go along. Once we're done with our notes, we have a short story to read and analyze together as a class. We're going to be looking at some examples of irony in this story in particular, both small incidents of irony as well as the overall arching theme of irony in this particular story. And then our final activity for this class period, you will be making your own examples and definitions. Well, not your own definitions, but you'll be making your own examples of irony and couple that with the definitions that you've learned in the form of a little project. So we'll get into those details at the end of this PowerPoint. So your notes are ready. Let's get started. The first type of irony is verbal. This is when a speaker or a writer says one thing but means the opposite. We often see this in conversation when we are speaking sarcastically. And as it says there, sarcasm is a type of verbal irony. For example, your mom could walk into your messy room and say, "I see you've cleaned your room." Typically, when verbal irony is being used out loud when someone's talking, there's this underlying tone where you can tell the person is meaning the opposite of what they're saying. Now, in writing, you can't actually hear the words being said, but it becomes pretty obvious when there's verbal irony when a character says something that is completely opposite to the situation or the event that they are encountering. The next type of irony is situational. Pretty obvious this has to do with situations and events. This is when the outcome of a situation is inconsistent with what we would expect or logically occur. Have you ever watched a movie and you've had in your head, this is how the story's going to end, because most movies are predictable like that. But then all of a sudden the movie ends and it leaves you going, what? I didn't see that coming. That would be situational irony. An example is if a thief was breaking into a house at the same time his house was being robbed. That's another example of situational irony. Maybe where the story is happening in such a way that it's kind of colloquially referred to as karma. He got what was coming to him. The situation was so ironic in that case. And finally, we have dramatic irony. This is when the audience or reader is aware of something that a character does not know. Again, we see this in a lot of movies. When a movie talks about two different characters and you see both characters' perspectives, it's like you're getting a little peek into their mind, but the other character in the movie doesn't know what the other one is thinking. And that can lead to some very cringy and embarrassing situations. But us watching from the outside, this objective third-party perspective, we're sitting there going, come on, don't do that, don't say that, or why did you get mad at him if you really know what he was thinking? And so that's the dramatic irony, when the reader or the viewer has this outside perspective where we can see both sides of what's going on, and we wish we could just jump into the story, bring these two characters together and tell them, guys, work it out. It's not that complicated. And yes, there's the example. We would know what both characters might be doing in a movie, but they don't, and that can lead to some confusion. Now, a good storyteller will wrap that up at the end. The characters are going to have some sort of an aha moment, and everything's going to work out, we hope. They don't want to leave you hanging too much. So let's, in our notebooks, do a quick guided practice. I have this question up here on the screen. Identify the type of irony. If you have a phobia of long words, you must tell people that you are a... Anyone want to try this one out? I don't know if even I could say it. Hippotomon strosis quipediliophobic. Yeah, I'm not going to say that one again. So, again, what kind of... Let's not focus too much on this long word, but let's think about the irony in this sentence. Is it verbal, dramatic, or situational? If you have a phobia of long words, you tell people you are this long word. Yes, we have situational irony. Because you're expected to say a long word when you're afraid of long words. Wait, what? How does that work, right? If I'm afraid of long words, I shouldn't have to use a long word to tell people I'm afraid of long words. Now, some of you might be saying, wait a minute, this is also verbal irony because it's a word. And yes, one thing to consider with irony is there are overlap in the categories. So don't get too hung up on that, but understand that this is an example mostly of situational irony, because you find yourself in this situation where someone says, do you have a fear of long words? And you say, yes, I'm a, and then you have to say a long word, right? Now, obviously, that's a very silly example, but it proves the point. So, another guided practice. I want everyone to take about 5 or 6 minutes. You don't have to write the question, but please write the answer. What is the type of irony in each example? Okay, so if you've taken your 5 minutes, let's go to the answers. Does someone want to share what they've gotten for number 1? The rat infestation at the Department of Sanitation. Yes, situational. You would not expect that an agency tasked with keeping things clean would have a rat infestation. Poor things. How about the mother? Yes, verbal. The mother is being verbally sarcastic and saying the opposite of what she means. Number 3 is an example of situational. If someone hates Twitter, you wouldn't expect to be seeing them using it. Number 4, dramatic. The audience knows what will happen, but the character does not. And if you have another answer, it's not necessarily wrong. You just need to be able to defend your answer. Like I said earlier, types of irony can overlap, and there can be more than one for a particular sentence. And yes, finally, situational. We have the situation of the tornado hitting out of the blue. We did not expect that because the sentence begins with how beautiful the day was. So that's a brief overview, and now you have in your notes some definitions, some examples, and I want you to keep those notes handy because as we go to our short story that we're going to be reading today, I want you to be looking for examples in the text of these kinds of irony, situational, dramatic, and verbal. The other question that I want you to keep in mind is the story as a whole. The story as a whole is a type of irony. So embedded in the story are little examples of irony, and then the overarching story as a whole is a particular kind of irony. So keep that big picture in mind as well as looking for the small details. So pull out your stories, and we are going to do a round robin read. I'll pull names from the lucky jar when it's your turn to read, and I'll tell you when you can stop, and the next person will start. We'll probably pause here and there to answer questions that I have written here in my annotations, and I might be annotating more up here on the screen as we go along. I would like you also, if you found something that's really jumped out to you as someone's reading, make a little note, make a little annotation of that, and you can bring it to the class's attention, when we pause in between readers. Also in your notes packet, we have some questions that we're going to follow up at the very end dealing with irony. So let's get started. All right, so that's the end of my little micro lesson here. The class would read the story together. We would discuss the things that I had annotated, add some annotations and some notes and some comments, particularly focused on the elements of irony in this story. We answered some questions in our notes about, what the overarching irony situation was there and some specific examples. And then the students were going to work in pairs to write their own examples of irony. And then if we had time, we would have a technology integration where they would choose their favorite of the class's example of irony and make a poster out of it on Canva. So that is the lesson.